The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Andrea McMaster.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Consider This. We're glad to have you. We've tackled this issue many times before, methamphetamine addiction. Today we hear a very personal story from a woman who used meth for 10 years. Driven by her addiction, she lost many jobs, became homeless, and ended up in jail on an assault charge. Finally, succeeding in treatment, she went back to school to get her master's degree and is now helping others addicted to meth. She is a big believer in the Matrix model, a treatment program for helping those addicted to methamphetamine, and we're going to hear more details about that model later on in the show. But first, I want to begin by introducing some of our guests today. Laurel Muting, who is the current chair for Partners for Meth Prevention. And Laurel, we're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
And helped bring our other guest in, who is with us today, Vicki West Sickles, who is a former meth user, but also currently working as a licensed medical social worker. And we're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Laurel, I want you to start off in talking a little bit about what Partners for Meth Prevention is, this group, this organization, and your goals of the group.
Okay, sure. Partners for Meth Prevention is an Omaha metro area, Council Bluffs area also, coalition that's comprised of over 25 different organizations and agencies. We're dedicated to providing information about methamphetamine and increasing awareness that meth shatters lives and destroys communities. So those are kind of our goals. That's kind of our charge. We have a lot of individuals who are just very passionate about this issue, and so some of the things that we've done in the past, for the past 2 years, we've had May proclaimed as Meth Prevention Month in both Nebraska and in Iowa, and we've held a celebration on May 1st to kind of kick off Meth Prevention Month. And this year our theme, as well as a kickoff for Meth Prevention Month, was a celebration of all of the success that we've seen collaborating with each other. We've seen agencies come together, and people are really pooling their resources to fight this drug. And I think that's really important for us to take a moment and say thank you to those agencies who are working alongside us in this fight. We've realized that you can't fight it one by one. Law enforcement can't fight it on their own. Treatment can't fight it on their own. Prevention can't fight it on their own. We need to work together in order to better help the people who are addicted.
And really that is the point of the coalition, is getting everybody to work together. There isn't anything else like that that's bringing people in across our state and the state of Iowa as well.
Exactly. And we've had a lot of success this year bridging the river, and we're really proud of that fact. We started out as a Council Bluffs coalition in 2004, and we've expanded, and we have several partners across the river now, and we're just really working together as a coalition, and realize that meth doesn't stop at the river. It's in Omaha, it's in Council Bluffs, it's in our area. It doesn't matter what state you're in. We need to work together on both sides. We need to communicate with law enforcement in Omaha, and Council Bluffs need to communicate together. Treatment providers need to communicate together better, and so that's really one of our focuses.
Okay, and you have a lot of educational activities, not only for the agencies involved, but also for the public to participate in, right?
Yes, definitely. Yesterday we had Vicki came down for yesterday and today, and we're really thrilled to have her. But we had a panel presentation at Metropolitan Community College with Vicki and 4 other individuals who have been addicted to methamphetamine. And the purpose of the day really was to show that there is hope. There's hope for people addicted to meth. For so long we've heard all the horror stories that you're not going to make it, and once you're addicted forever, and there's such a low success rate. And we just wanted people to know that that's not necessarily the case. According to the Matrix model, people who are addicted to methamphetamine are recovering at the same rate as alcohol and cocaine abusers. And so that's another statistic that we wanted to get out there. So yesterday was about sharing hope and sharing their struggles, their stories, their hope, their healing. And it was open to the public, a free event, and we had probably 45 to 50 people there. So it was exciting.
Good, especially probably for those family members to hear who have
Yes.
a loved one who maybe has a meth addiction problem.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, I want to introduce then Vicki and have you share a little bit about your story, a lot of probably what you shared yesterday, but talk a little bit about why you started using meth. I know individuals start using for a lot of different reasons. What led you down that road?
Right, it was probably a couple of different things, Andrea. I kind of had set myself up as a party girl when I was in high school, and when I was in college, I drank a lot and smoked a lot of pot and was willing to try about whatever came across, came in front of me. And then in college, I had some kind of emotionally devastating experiences, and that led me to deepen my addiction. When my heart was broken, and so I started injecting cocaine, and it was kind of, for me, it was a line that I crossed because of some emotional trauma that I wasn't prepared to cope with. And I spent a lot of time after college, I relocated. We call it, in recovery, we call it the geographical relocation as a means of treatment. I did that many times. That was the first time that I did it. So I had already graduated from college when I first did meth. And it was in 1988, and somebody asked me if I wanted to try a line after I'd been drinking, which I really consider the gateway drug as alcohol, because it lowers your inhibitions and affects your judgment. So, and at the time that I encountered it, my father had just passed away 4 months prior to that. So I was grieving, so again, I was emotionally vulnerable. But like I said, I had already set myself up to be a try-anything kind of person. So when somebody offered me a line of meth, I had never heard of it before. And so I said, sure, I'll try it. Now, I think that if I had known then what I know now, I'm still not sure that I would have been able to say no, because it was emotionally where I was at the time. But I would have at least considered it, But at the time, I knew nothing about it. So I first tried it in 1988, and then off and on for the next 10 years, I would geographically relocate to try to get away from it, and then inevitably I would fall into it wherever I was again. So the first time I went to treatment was in 1993, and I emphasize that it was the first time because for a lot of us it takes more than one time to get it done. There's so much to consider that it's hard to follow all the steps that you need to stay clean. So I went to treatment because my family, who I'm lucky to have my family, they've always been very supportive and as aware as you can be of what's going on, but they noticed that I wasn't taking good care of my child. And they convinced me that I needed to go to drug treatment and take care of it. So I did that, and I stayed clean that time for 6 months. And they recommend, that you go to 12-step meetings, which are very important in early recovery, and get a sponsor. And I did that. They suggested that I go to a halfway house. I said, I don't really need a halfway house. So that was the piece that I didn't do that time. So I managed to stay clean for 6 months, and then relapsed at the end of 6 months. And there's a lot of information that we have now about meth and how it works on the brain that we didn't have then. The dopamine, the neurotransmitter dopamine, is what meth most affects in the body, and it floods your brain with dopamine, which is your feel-good neurotransmitter. So you have so much of it that you feel 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and you can do everything all at once. And that's the trick and the trap of it, is that at first it makes you feel so good, but what happens is eventually that your brain can't produce what it needs to feel good without the meth. And it takes months and months for it to start producing the dopamine again. So at 6 months, my brain still wasn't producing what I needed to feel good, and I'm still trying to clean up the mess of my life. And I thought, if this is all there is to recovery, then I don't want it. And I relapsed at that time. Now, if somebody had told me, okay, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and another 6 months, you'll start feeling a lot better, it might have made a difference. But I relapsed on sex with somebody who was in the 12-step program, which is another thing that causes your brain to flood with dopamine. And then it set the craving up in me, and within a few weeks, I was doing meth again. At the time, I called it my relapse vacation and said, I know I don't want to live this way, but I'm not done yet because my thinking is all askew. I had missions, I had projects, I had things that I wanted to do, you know, while I was still using, but I knew I didn't want to stay there. But my relapse vacation lasted for 5 years. And that was when my addiction took me to those horrible places that you mentioned, the homeless, the fired from jobs, the evicted, the domestic violence, the assault charge. All of those things occurred. The real insanity occurred in those 5 years. And as bad as it got, and as much as I was I mean, at one time I had sticky notes all over my house that said, "Crank steals everything." And it really does. I mean, people lose their homes, their jobs, their children, it really does take everything. And even all these sticky note reminders, you know, and knowing that and telling people it's not fun. I'm not sure why I'm doing it, but I can't quit. So it was getting in trouble. It was a legal intervention that finally got me into recovery that lasted. It was 1998, and we were living in the country, way down in South Union County. So it was kind of like gravity. We just fell in with people who knew how to cook, and we started contributing our little piece to the manufacturing process. And eventually we all got raided, and fortunately, before it got too bad. And I was able to get into treatment at that time. Now this time, the last time I went to treatment in 1998, I said right away, put me on the list for the halfway house. I mean, I wanted to do everything that I didn't get done before to make sure that I never had to go on a relapse vacation like that again.
Hey, you succeeded. Well, I want to stop and point out some of the things that I've learned about your story is that you were an honor student. You were a good student. You came from a great family, a supportive family. And I want to point this out because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's those people that use meth that, you know, they just have those struggles, and it's the family dynamics are awful, and they're the poor students all the way around. That wasn't your case, and so I guess I'm pointing that out because we can't really put a label on who's going to use meth.
No, there's a stereotype of a typical meth addict, and it's not. It crosses all boundaries. I'm meeting all kinds of people in recovery, you know, that had the same advantages that I did and still managed to fall into it. I mean, we live in a world that demands productivity, you know. People want to have energy. Look, all the little stacks of energy drinks at the convenience stores, you know, and the coffee shop on every corner. We live in a world that demands energy, and there's some of us who are just willing to cross the line, I guess, into something that's not legal, or find yourself in an emotionally vulnerable state in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's kind of astonishing what you'll do.
Well, you mentioned several times that the drug really had power over you.
Right.
So talk a little bit more about that. I mean, at one point it was so much that you decided you were pouring all your finances and all your money into getting more of the methamphetamine, and so you needed to even start dealing the drug, right, to continue bringing in some finances to support your habit.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that power, and really, I know you've mentioned a lot, going to the dark side.
Right. There's several different ways to talk about it. I mean, you can talk about the science and how it's actually affecting your brain, and then you can talk about the cognitive process where it immediately affects the way you think about things. I mean, when we use the matrix model for the research that we're doing, there's a great section on the brain and how it's affecting cognitive functioning, and it compares it like with Pavlov's dog, where it goes immediately to the limbic center of your brain, which is your instinct center, you know. So people who get addicted to meth, pretty rapidly, you can be triggered by just thinking about it. Or when the phone rings, your palms start to sweat and your guts start to knot, because there's a physical reaction in your body from really the actual ringing of the bell. If you know that the person on the other end is going to tell you if there's meth in town or not, you know. So there, you get that response. And then your thinking, I mean, I don't even know how to describe how your thinking is immediately affected, to the point where you get obsessed with it. And you have other things that you need to think about, you know, your job and your family and your finances, but you're focused on meth and getting high and the projects that you've got around that. So pretty soon, all the space in your brain is taken up with meth and more meth. So naturally, these things are falling by the wayside. You know, your relationships and your finances and your parenting, all that is suffering. And then you feel guilty about that and ashamed about that. And so when you use more meth, you don't have to feel that. So it's a really vicious circle. There's a nice little teeter-totter sort of image in the matrix slides that shows you start using and there's all these positive effects, you know, increased energy, increased output, and you're thinking clearly and all this positive, and the negative stuff is not happening yet because you're not getting in trouble. But as you move through the introduction phase and the maintenance phase and the disaster phase, eventually the negatives start outweighing the positives as you start suffering at work and everything, really things start to fall apart. But as they start to fall apart, you're still getting relief from depression and relief from stress. And so those things, those positive things from the meth use, or, you know, positive things, keep you from being completely overwhelmed by the mess that your life is becoming. So it's really a vicious circle. I mean, we like to talk to people who work with human services and that kind of thing and tell them, you have to understand that a person is not making a choice, a conscious choice to use drugs instead of take care of their children or get their children back out of the system. It's that's the only way that they know to feel good, and their thinking is so distorted that you can't quite put A, B, and C together and take the logical steps that you need to clean things up, because your thinking is all circular and scattered.
That's the first time that I've heard it explained to me. That actually starts to make sense, and I kind of understand why treatment doesn't work, and a lot of times why it doesn't work the first time. So, Laurel, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about the Matrix model, what it is. I know Vicki's mentioned a couple of different times. Bring us back to the background of the Matrix model and why it's now being used for methamphetamine addicts.
Okay, the Matrix model was originally developed in the 1980s in California, and it was developed by the Matrix Institute to treat the crack cocaine epidemic out there. And what they found is that it does work for methamphetamine. It works for all other drugs, but specifically has been research based on methamphetamine also. So it's very behaviorally based. That's the different thing about Matrix than what we were doing previously as treatment. It's not about processing your feelings and your emotions. It's more about behaviors that we're teaching clients. We're giving them the skills and the knowledge that they need to stay clean. When they're having a trigger, as Vicki talked about before, what can they do? Because it switches from that cortical, from your upper level brain to that lower limbic brain, and it just takes over. And so what can they do? What are some things that they can think off the top of their head? What can they do? They can go for a walk, or they can, a lot of times we'll put a rubber band on their wrist and they'll snap it to just kind of bring them back to reality. So it's teaching clients skills and behaviors that they need in order to stay clean.
Do you think, we've talked a lot about there is hope, but talk about that process of treatment and relapse and going to treatment and trying to make treatment successful, and how do you get there? How do you have a successful treatment? I don't know if you know the exact answer to that. It would be wonderful if you did, but what are some of the key factors that are needed to have a successful treatment?
Well, I think one of the key factors is that for people to understand that relapse is part of recovery. It's going to happen. If it doesn't happen to you, that's wonderful. But if it does, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're going back down that same path. That means that you had a relapse and we'll get you back in, we'll work with you, we'll use your support systems, call your sponsors, talk to your counselors, and we'll get you back on the right track. And just knowing that it may not be the first time that you're in treatment that it works. It might be the second time, and just not to give up, because every time you're there, you're learning something new. And that's one of the things about the Matrix, is that it's a 16-week program. And so we're hoping, and a lot of the things are repeated in it. The themes are the same. They're repeated from week 1 through week 16. And so they're very basic skills that clients need that they haven't had when they've been using. Their life has been chaotic and just really messy. And coming into Matrix model treatment, it's very clean. We're scheduling. They're scheduling their day. They're planning out what they're going to do. What meetings are they going to go to? When are they going to have lunch? When are they going to have dinner? What are they going to do in between times? So it's very scheduled and routine, and getting them back into that real life world.
What would you say, Vicki? How would you convince people to quit? I mean, how would you convince people to even get in the door of a treatment center, of a treatment program?
That's the million-dollar question. If we can get that figured out. I mean, you can't underestimate the importance of legal intervention and intervention from human services, and sometimes medical intervention, like in emergency rooms. That's where most meth addicts are getting treatment, is on an emergent basis. So points of intervention where you can point people towards the door. I mean, it was the law that forced me to get into treatment, and I'm lucky that it did. A lot of people have that kind of bottom where they're, this is a chance to get some clean time, and I appreciate that it's there. So there's that. But if we can figure out how to motivate people to want to change before they get into trouble, then we'll have really figured something out. But nobody's got that yet. And so that's what we have to tell families when they say, it's like watching a train wreck, you know? I can see that it's happening again, and that how do you stop it before it spirals out of control and somebody hits the wall? And that is the million-dollar question, how to get someone there. But once you do, I mean, Laurel's right about this long 16-week program, and the fact that there's real hands-on tools for this cognitive behavioral therapy platform I think is a great platform. I really like working with it. But for me, it was the long-term, you know, the 90 days in a halfway house. And then I lived for 3 years with my sister. I call that the 3/4 of the way house. But I had sober support and was able to like focus on my career, and somebody was helping me with the bills and the child care, and having that long-term support while I learned to live again was huge. A lot of the people that I work with, they don't have that. They're coming in on an outpatient basis and struggling with their housing, or they have to live with a family who's now using, and that's like defying gravity to stay clean in that situation. So having that long-term support, and I think ultimately finding something to do with your life that gives you purpose. When you talk to somebody who's really involved in the 12-step program, that gives them purpose. They've got it's part of it is helping other people, you know, going to 12-step meetings and helping other people stay off it. So that purpose and passion to have something important in your life to focus on that makes you feel good besides the drug, I think that's paramount.
That's key. What do you want families to know? I think when I was reading a little bit about your story, that even your family for a while was going through the denial process. This isn't happening to the Vicki that we know.
Right.
And so I'm sure that that's an emotion that would be natural. So talk a little bit about what you want families to know.
Well, if you have a family member that's in treatment, it's really important to get involved in their treatment, to go. Most treatment programs, I know family component is really important part of the Matrix platform, and most treatment centers have a family program where you can get involved, so that not only are you learning what your addicted family member is going to need, you're also learning how to take care of yourself, because by the time they get there, you're pretty used up, you know. So it's really important to get involved in someone's treatment, and while you're waiting for them to get to treatment, you can still get support, like Al-Anon meetings. There's people who are dealing with it. There's a great website that I've been referring people to lately. It's kci.org, and it's a message board where families are going and saying things like, why do his eyes look like that, you know? So on the message board, there's 20 people saying, well, his pupils are dilated, you know, different things they're talking about. That people who have dealt with it and been there are providing support and information to people who are trying to figure it out. So it's a great resource.
I'm sure that would be key. I want to hit on a little bit too, is that to make a treatment successful, for me, understanding this a little bit, it's getting that person out of their old surroundings, getting them moved on, getting them to have new friends, new peers, those people that they were using with, out of their lives completely. That's going to be extremely challenging though, because you're starting from the beginning a lot of times.
That's where I think the kind of work that Laurel and the Coalition are doing here is so important, because the work that they're doing is starting to create environments, you know, where people are coming together in a way, and that's what it's going to require. I mean, we're going to have to clean up neighborhoods so that people don't get plucked out and treated and sent back to the same neighborhood. It's really going to take a village. I mean, it's really going to take a community effort to create safe places for people to be.
Did you want to add anything to that? I mean, it sounds like impossible.
It does.
But it's worth talking about.
It does. And I think another important thing is for people to realize that treatment, it's not this, there's so much stigma associated with treatment, and for families to realize that other families are struggling with this as well, and it's not just your family, and just to talk about it in your community, talk about it with your friends, talk about it at your workplace, because that opens the door for other people to say, I've had this experience with meth too, and it's tearing our family apart. How can I get help? And I think just, you know, talking about the subject makes it less of a stigma and less of a huge and horrible, ugly secret.
Well, I know in the state of Nebraska, the state of Iowa, the same. A lot of the Midwest states have a lot of rural areas, and I know that that's something that we've talked about before, the lack of resources, maybe 2 hours to the nearby treatment center. And there is an area where we're seeing a lot more meth use. And so I don't know what the answers are for those situations, those areas, but that's out there, that's happening. What do you talk about in your coalition of that?
Well, I think that requires really talking with our legislators and lobbying with our legislators and getting them to understand that these are real problems that people face out in these rural areas, and they have no way to get to treatment, and they have no money to get to treatment. And so I think that's going to be something that's required from the top down, that, you know, I think they just really, we need to talk with them and let them know the depth of the problem and what needs to be done, that there aren't any resources available, or there aren't many resources available for those regions.
Vicki, I learned that you use poetry, sometimes music, art, in dealing with some of the meth addicts that you work with. Talk a little bit about that. Why? I mean, that sounds so different than the norm that we hear, but why is that helping those that you're working with?
Well, I came to that because it helped me. Because when I was using, I was writing and journaling and writing songs, and it was a place to put the crazy thoughts, you know, and the mixed up emotions that I was dealing with. And I really think it helped me keep my sanity and not completely lose my way, because if it's out on paper there, I have to see what it is. And when I got into recovery, I was in treatment, and I looked around, and everyone, you know, there were many people who were also writing poetry and using music as a way to heal themselves and calm themselves. And when I went to get my master's degree, I wrote a thesis on poetry therapy and discovered that there's actually an association of poetry therapists, and people are using it. Doctors and psychiatrists and social workers are using poetry as an intervention, as a means to help people deal with their emotions. And it just seemed really powerful to me. And I've always thought that music is a language where I could sit and talk to a group of kids about a point, and they're kind of looking around, but if I sing them a song about it, then I get their attention. So I've always thought it was a powerful way to speak, and maybe, you know, it's kind of a dream of mine. We're talking about how do you wake people up and make them want recovery. I mean, I think if anything has the power to do that, it's music. It's a spiritual thing, you know.
Well, we only have 1 minute left, but I just wanted I want you to talk about that. Does it have to be with going through the treatment? Do you have to have a spiritual angle to it, part of your treatment? I know that was meaningful for you.
No, I don't think you have to have it.
Okay.
There's people who are getting clean using, I mean, we're doing clinical trials. Medication is helping people get through the rough spots. Whatever gets someone through the door and whatever works. I mean, there's all different angles. But the more, I mean, we're mind, body, and soul, you know, and the more you can treat all of that, the better success I think you'll have.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vicki, and also Laurel Muting from the Partners for Meth Prevention. We're glad that you could join us this week as well on Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.